Hello and welcome to France 2022, The Choice, our daily show covering the presidential race. Just 11 days to go before round two. Marine Le Pen eager to show her foreign policy credentials, while Emmanuel Macron warns about the dangers of the far right. The fight for the Élysée Palace is in full swing, and keeping a close eye on the race is Jolie Sitbon.
The battle for the runoff focuses on international strategy. Marine Le Pen had been criticized for being too close to Vladimir Putin. Instead of flipping her position, she says NATO should come closer to Moscow after the war.
Je me prononcerai en faveur de la mise en œuvre d'un rapprochement stratégique entre l'OTAN et la Russie, comme cela avait été naguère envisagé. C'est l'intérêt de la France et de l'Europe.
Europe, or rather the EU, has become the focus of the battle. Le Pen denying she plans to leave the bloc.
Nous sommes tous des défenseurs de l'Europe. Et moi, je considère que transformer l'Union européenne en Alliance européenne des nations, c'est sauver l'Europe.
Visiting Strasbourg, Emmanuel Macron accused the far-right candidate of preparing a Frexit anyway.
Ne laissez pas s'installer, ni en France ni ailleurs, des projets qui, sans le dire ou en le disant, proposent de sortir de l'Europe, la foule aux pieds, la fragilisent.
The fight is bitter. To get people who have not voted for him in the first round to do so now, Macron says his rival is a dangerous extremist.
Malgré tous les efforts, le vrai visage de l'extrême droite revient. C'est un visage qui ne respecte pas les libertés, le cadre constitutionnel, l'indépendance de la presse et des libertés fondamentales, des droits durement et chèrement acquis qui sont au cœur de nos valeurs, comme l'abolition de la peine de mort.
What does Le Pen want to do on the death penalty? In the past, she has said the French could bring it back by referendum.
Nous sommes opposés à la peine de mort et favorables à l'instauration de la perpétuité réelle. En revanche, ce que nous défendons, c'est l'instauration dans la Constitution du référendum d'initiative citoyenne, c'est-à-dire qu'à partir du moment où les Français, le peuple français, veut se saisir d'un sujet qui peut être un sujet de société, eh bien, il se réunit, 500 000 signatures, et cela déclenche un référendum.
Le Pen and her supporters say that portraying them as extremists is an old trick, and Macron is the real threat.
Le danger Emmanuel Macron, lui, il est bien réel. Ça fait 5 ans qu'il le vit. La disparition des libertés, une France fracturée comme jamais, un mépris et un dédain à l'égard des Français.
On the other side of the political spectrum, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who came third, has kick-started a consultation of his supporters. They can vote for Macron, blank, or not at all. Le Pen is not an option. Mélenchon's allies are trying to force the president to back off from some of his pledges in exchange for their support.
Franchement, des gens qui se sont battus pour que la retraite soit à 60 ans à taux plein, vous entendez bien que c'est pas parce qu'on va dire 64 plutôt que 65 que ça va les convaincre. Si Emmanuel Macron veut faire un geste dans cette direction, qu'il abandonne tout simplement sa réforme des retraites.
That is all from the campaign trail. Meet again tomorrow, same time.
Well, let's take a look now at the latest polls.
Yes, the polls for round two. Obviously, a poll by IFOP Fiducial. It shows that Emmanuel Macron would garner 53% of the vote versus Marine Le Pen 47%. Macron is inching up in this poll as well as other poll published today. Just a reminder, in 2017, he garnered 2/3 of the vote against the same Marine Le Pen.
Well, Mark, as we saw in the recap earlier, Marine Le Pen presented her foreign policy priorities today.
Yes, she covered a number of topics, of issues, Europe, Germany, but given the kind words she had used in the past for Vladimir Putin, all eyes were on what she would say or not say about Russia. Our Clovis Casali attended her press conference.
For Marine Le Pen, this press conference was all about outlining her vision of world affairs. This election is followed closely abroad, with many countries wondering what relations would be like with France if the far right got into power. Of course, the candidate of the National Rally was urged to clarify her position regarding Russia. She tried to distance herself as much as possible from Vladimir Putin, saying she met the Russian president only once back in 2017. At the same time, she said that strong ties with Moscow was still possible if it was in France's best interest. I asked her, are you ready to arm Ukraine? Are you ready to provide weapons and intelligence to the Ukrainians fighting off the Russian invasion, defending themselves? And she replied, yes, but no weapons that could turn France into a belligerent, drag France into a war in Ukraine. Marine Le Pen, the far-right candidate, also said that she wanted a partnership between NATO and Russia once the war was over in Ukraine. Quite difficult to imagine in the current circumstances. And then at the end of the press conference, there was an incident with 3 activists in the room. A young lady holding a banner with a heart and a picture of Vladimir Putin and Marine Le Pen in that heart. She was swiftly dragged away by security. And then another man seizing the microphone and pretending to be an RT, a Russia Today reporter, and asking Marine Le Pen, why aren't you returning Vladimir Putin's calls? As you can imagine, a rather chaotic end to this press conference on international affairs.
Meanwhile, the incumbent is trying to garner support from all across the aisle.
All across the aisle, absolutely. Most noticeably, he got the support from one of his predecessor, conservative former president Nicolas Sarkozy, fueling speculation that both men had reached a secret deal to form a future majority in parliament. Macron this morning was quick to dismiss that there was such a deal and stressed that he also got endorsement from leftist personalities. Let's take a listen.
Il n'y a pas d'accord avec qui que ce soit. Je me félicite du soutien de Nicolas Sarkozy, qui a été très clair et qui a marqué un soutien d'adhésion en se reconnaissant dans ce que je porte sur l'Europe, sur le travail. Je m'en félicite. Le même jour, Lionel Jospin, Bertrand Delanoë, Bernard Cazeneuve l'ont aussi fait. Et je m'en félicite aussi. Et je pense que ça montre aussi, et je le dis avec beaucoup d'humilité et de gravité, le fait que dans le moment que nous vivons, ces soutiens m'obligent.
And Conservative Valérie Pécresse scored below 5% last Sunday in that first round of the election, the centre-right's lowest score in modern history.
Absolutely, a drubbing, and the party leaders are at loss. They're more divided than ever. They're struggling to give clear voting instructions. So who will their militants vote for? France 24's Karina Chabour and Maya Anaïs yet again tried to figure out.
A historic defeat leading to a huge dilemma. Conservative leaders gave no clear voting instruction, merely saying that there would be no votes for Le Pen on April 24th, or, like Valérie Pécresse, that they would personally vote for Macron. These militants will follow her lead in the name of a Republican front.
Regarding my vote in the second round, I'm just following what she said in her speech on Sunday. She mentioned former President Chirac's values and the refusal to give in to the far right. For me, the right should oppose extremes, so that is why I will vote for Emmanuel Macron.
I would say that it is, of course, a vote of reason, a vote of responsibility that rejects the far right. Also, as a young 21-year-old, I want to live in a peaceful society where everyone can discuss and debate without violence.
These militants from eastern France aren't excited by the face-off either.
I haven't made up my mind yet. I'm hesitating between a blank ballot or a vote by default for Macron. He's the one with the closest economic views to mine.
I'm seriously considering casting a blank vote. It's the easy choice. I don't see myself voting for either of them.
Raphaël Rosa is not your average activist. She's the Conservative nominee for the legislative elections in the 8th district of Moselle. Alongside her deputy, Kevin Schweitzer, she hopes to win back this territory that's been conquered 5 years ago by Emmanuel Macron's party.
In any case, we'll do everything to have a maximum of seats in the Assembly and to be able to show that the party is united, that the party is still alive, and that our elected officials are there to show the strength of the party. Having failed to meet the vote threshold for campaign reimbursement, Conservatives are on a broke ahead of the next elections. Keeping their 101 MPs in June is now the only way for them to keep their heads above water.
And it's time for our segment called the French presidential election for dummies. Each week we're focusing on some of the particularities of the French election, which at times might raise eyebrows abroad, Mark.
Yes, and we welcome for that Florence Villeminot. Florence, today we're going to put the spotlight on something called in French, le front républicain. It translates into the Republican bloc vote. It's a traditional, we could say that, a voting alliance between the left and the right to block a far-right candidate reaching the second round of the presidential election. Well, this is exactly what we have this time around, with Marine Le Pen making it to the second round versus Emmanuel Macron. So before we figure out whether it's still working or not, where does this Front Républicain come from?
Well, it dates back to the Fourth Republic and in particular the legislative elections of 1956. The expression was apparently used for the first time in the magazine L'Express. Now, at the time, the National Rally or the National Front did not exist. The far right was represented by Pierre Poujade, an anti-tax, populist, xenophobic politician. He's often seen as the predecessor to Jean-Marie Le Pen, the founder of the National Front and the father of Marine Le Pen. Now, in the legislative elections of 1956, the radical left, the Workers' Party, and the conservative Gaullist Party joined together to block Pierre Poujade. You can see images of him there, to block his voters, essentially. And this strategic motley crew that came together to block the far right was dubbed the Front Républicain.
And Flo, this idea of the strategic buffer vote is to ensure that the far right doesn't win that second round. But over the years, it's worked with varying degrees of success. And the most striking example was in the second round of the presidential vote in 2002.
Absolutely. That was 20 years ago. But here in France, we still talk about that incredible election. Now, on the evening of round one, so April 21st, 2002, a date that has really gone down in history here, it was a shocking turn of events because the socialist candidate, Lionel Jospin, he was really seen as a shoo-in, and he was eliminated in round one. What we're looking at here are the images of the election party for the Socialist Party. You can see people screaming, people in tears. This was such a shocking event in French history. The fact that the far right even made it to round two, people were shocked. Now, this meant that the conservative Jacques Chirac found himself in the second round against Jean-Marie Le Pen, and that in the second round, left-wing voters massively played this Front Républicain card, this blockade. They massively backed Jacques Chirac and he won the election with 82% of the vote. That's an incredible score. What you can see here are images of a massive demonstration that took place across the country. This was on May 1st, so a couple days before the second round. 1.5 million people across the country, 500,000 people in Paris, essentially a human wave to say no to Jean-Marie Le Pen. It's really interesting to go back and look at the footage from the time and to listen to these left-wing voters who were crossing the party line for the first time. Let's listen to some communist voters and their decision to vote for Jacques Chirac.
Je pense même que je vais sortir avec un certain sentiment de fierté du bureau de vote d'avoir voté Chirac. Et pourtant, en tant que communiste, ça paraît pas évident.
Il n'y a pas de question à se poser. Pour moi, le pire, ça serait vraiment que Le Pen il passe. Et s'il passait, moi, c'est clair et net aussi. Je me suis dit, je fais pas d'enfant, je veux pas qu'il vive ça.
Florence, in the 2017 presidential election, Jean-Marie Le Pen's daughter, Marine Le Pen, was the second Le Pen to qualify for a second round. She garnered a third of the vote. The big question is whether this time around things will be different.
Well, we were just looking at the polls a little while ago. It doesn't seem like the Front Républicain is going to work this time. It seems like it's going to be a very tight race between Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen. And what's interesting is the president himself, Emmanuel Macron, he says that the Front Républicain is a thing of the past. He says he wants to bring people together using a new method. It's unclear what this new method will be, but that's what he's saying. Now, what does Marine Le Pen think about the president's remarks on the fact that the Front Républicain might just be dead? Well, our team of journalists asked her the question on Monday, and here's what she had to say.
Le Front républicain, c'est encore une fois une manière de se faire sauver alors qu'on ne le mérite pas. Voilà, par une sorte d'appel automatique au barrage. Donc sûrement, il comptait sur ce front républicain qui par ailleurs n'a jamais été républicain, qui a toujours été très anti-républicain.
Thank you very much, Florence. We'll have the answer to your questions on April 24th. You can join us. Florence will be there as well on election night here on France 24, April 24th as well. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow at 8:15 p.m. for France 2022, The Choice.